Hey guys, so now that we've finished our countdown of my top 10 favorite plays, I thought I'd do one or two extra just little bonus things. And one thing that I haven't really talked about a lot yet is the actual technical aspects of Shakespeare's writing. So I thought I'd mention a couple of my favorite instances of Shakespeare using the specific structure of his writing to convey extra meaning. So the first one we have is in Romeo and Juliet, Act 1, Scene 5, and that is how Romeo and Juliet's first conversation is a perfectly formatted Shakespearean sonnet. So the first thing that Shakespearean sonnets entail is, of course, the usual iambic pentameter that Shakespeare has, which is, iambic pentameter is when it has 10 syllables and it goes stress, unstress for it. So one famous line that's iambic pentameter is, "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" That's an example of iambic pentameter. I'll also link one of my sister's videos down below that explains it in more detail, and that will be on Megan's channel. The next thing you have with a Shakespearean sonnet is that it follows a rhyme scheme of A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. It's 14 lines. And yeah, with these two, it goes Romeo saying 4 lines that follows the A, B, A, B format. Then Juliet says another 4 that is the C, D, C, D. And then they switch back and forth for the E, F, E, F, and the G, G. So kind of the lesson that you get from this is how in sync they are, and of course the sonnet is the traditional romantic poetry form, so the fact they're speaking in a sonnet is very clearly trying to drive home that this is a romantic scene. The next technique I want to talk about, I haven't really heard a specific title for it, but it's basically writing a duet for 2 characters. That's the word that I heard used anyway. And the example I'm going to use is from Midsummer Night's Dream Act 1, Scene 1. And this is when Hermia and Helena are talking about why does Demetrius love Hermia instead of Helena, even though Hermia hates him and Helena loves him. And you have Hermia saying, "I frown upon him, yet he loves me still." And then Helena adds on, "Oh, that your frowns would teach my smiles such skill." And this continues on for a number of lines where they're rhyming with each other, cutting back and forth from one line to the next. And it creates this really musical feel to the conversation and really encourages the language to go quite quickly. And it really drives home how close these 2 women are and the fact that they are in complete agreement with each other and they're totally in sync. And that pops up a couple times in this play. I believe Hermia and Lysander also have another one later on. And the third thing I want to talk about is the use of you versus thou, because these 2 words have slightly different meanings in Shakespeare's time. Just to clarify, this is only talking about singular. If we're talking about plural, you is always the correct word. But if we're talking about singular, then you can use either one, but they have slightly different connotations. So with you, it is the more formal, respectful term. So you can use it either as a distancing term or as a way of showing respect. So for instance, if I was talking to someone who has authority over me, I would refer to them with the you terms. So if I refer to someone who's higher in rank than me with the word thou, it either means that I'm showing them disrespect or that we're very close. One of those 2. And it will be the opposite. If you refer to someone of lower or equal rank to you with you, then it means that they are either distant from you or you're showing them extra respect. Depends on the situation. So I'm going to use another example from Midsummer for this one, just because this is the play that I know the best. This pops up a lot in different plays, especially the histories where you've got lots of different kings and stuff. But I'm going to be using the first scene from Act 2 of Midsummer Night's Dream. We have a conversation between Puck and an unnamed fairy in this scene. And it starts out with Puck referring to the fairy with you forms. He says, "How now, spirit, whither wander you?" And she responds with a lengthy explanation about where she's been. Everywhere is the short answer. And then near the end of the speech, she says, "Farewell, thou lob of spirits, I'll be gone." So he uses you forms to refer to her, and she uses thou forms to refer to him. Now, based on what we've observed of these 2, they're probably equals in terms of rank. So what's probably happening here is that she sees him probably as beneath her. And we know that Puck probably does not appear exactly imposing. He's referred to as a goblin and a hobgoblin, and we know that he's Oberon's court jester. So he probably looks a little bit unintimidating here. There's a couple different ways you can take this, but the way I tend to look at it is that she looked at him and went, "Oh, like, you are beneath me." But then it gets really interesting, because then Puck goes on to, they talk for a little bit longer. He basically says, like, "Don't let Titania come here because Oberon's going to be here and they'll fight." And then she kind of almost ignores what he says and cuts in, "Either I mistake your shape in making quite, or else you are that shrewd and knavish sprite called Robin Goodfellow." So she's cut into you forms. So she figured out who he is, and now she's suddenly referring to him with respectful terms. So basically, she was not at all impressed with him until she realized that he was Robin Goodfellow, and suddenly it's, oh, okay, I can't believe I actually met you. So I like to think of this fairy as a bit of a fangirl, because that's kind of the vibe I get off of these thou and you forms. And based on the fact that Puck is totally milking it once he realizes that she knows who he is, yeah, that wouldn't surprise me if Puck has fangirls, just saying. Also, it's important to note that when she switches to you forms, he switches to thou forms. So, thou speakest right is his response. I don't think it's him showing disrespect, though it could be. And with Puck, I wouldn't be all that surprised, but I think it's probably him kind of acting all buddy-buddy with her, because it's actually a very friendly speech that he gives here. And the last one I want to talk about is actually continuing in the same scene that I was just talking about, and that is the use of prose versus rhyming verse. Because technically speaking, all of Shakespeare is written in verse, but the times that he chooses to use rhymes is very, very interesting. So I've seen this mostly in Midsummer, but it does pop up in his other work, and that is that he uses rhyming verse to indicate when someone is either more refined or in sync with another person. So that opening scene, that opening section with Puck and the fairy, they're rhyming through most of that speech. You have the fairy rhyming briar and fire, pensioners be, spots you see, fairy savers live their savers, etc., etc., and then Puck's doing the same thing, tonight and sight, wrath and half, etc., etc., all the way down the speeches. And this keeps going, indicating that they're in sync. Like, yeah, there's a little bit of snideness with her referring to him with thou forms at first, but for the most part they're fine with each other. And this continues up until the end of their conversation. Now, just as some context, the fairy king and queen, Oberon and Titania, who I mentioned earlier, have been fighting, in a kind of scary way. Puck works for Oberon, the fairy works for Titania. So they're in sync with each other, right up to here. So he says, "But room, fairy, here comes Oberon." She responds, "And here my mistress would that he were gone." So they're still rhyming. Then Oberon and Titania come on stage. The next lines are, "Ill met by moonlight, proud Titania." That's Oberon. And then Titania, I've heard it both ways, responds, "What, jealous Oberon, fairies skip hence, I have forsworn his bed and company." They've dropped the rhymes and are speaking in prose. So instantly there's the words themselves almost have a bit of a clash, and it's quite jarring actually when you are reading the full scene. So it can be used to show discord, but it can also be used to show refinement. So the fairies are the ones who, if I'm remembering correctly, most frequently speak in verse, which gives them kind of an almost otherworldly, extra level kind of feel, whereas people like the rude mechanicals, as the play calls them, which is the players, Quince, Bottom, all of those people, they are humans, and they're also fairly low class, and they almost always speak in just straight prose. So that lack of rhymes tells you a lot about what's going on in this scene and what kind of people are speaking. So yeah, those are kind of my favorite instances of Shakespeare using verse structure and word choice to convey extra meaning to the audience. Thank you for watching. Feel free to comment down below. I'm happy to talk to you guys, and have a fabulous day. See you later.